We are live. Welcome to our February live event, the RV Repair Club. My name's Dave Solberg. I'm the managing editor, and welcome to our evening. We're going to do questions and answers. For those of you that have been hit by the storms, I hope everybody's doing well and has some power back. We didn't get quite the storms, but we were 20 below zero and minus 40, 45 degrees below zero with wind chill, and it was that was pretty brutal. I do have a granddaughter down in Austin, Texas they got 6.5 inches of snow and everybody freaks out, and they've been out without power for 3 days. So I feel sorry for those of you that are out without power or trying to be in an RV at this point with a storm hitting. So hope everybody is safe. So with that, we'll start with our first question if we have one of those. Maybe just give you a little update on, we did purchase a 1997 Forest River Salem that we are going to be doing a renovation on, and that is started with tearing out all the furniture. George from the Woodworkers Guild did that, and we in the process found the floor had quite a bit of extensive leaks, damage to it, so he's replaced the floor, and we're in the process of getting weight ratings and stuff so we know what we can put in, so keep an eye out for that. We did report last month the Tampa Super Show went, Courtside went. We are seeing a few RV shows starting to pick up in states where they'll allow a certain percentage of participants that do the social distancing and wear the mask and so forth, but there are still, most of them are shut down. So with that, Angie's got a question, and if I will make sure I restate the question so people hear it.
Okay, Ken asks, when doing a solar upgrade, is there an ideal minimum or maximum recommended ratio of solar capacity to battery capacity? Example, solar capacity in watts should be 2 times the battery capacity in AH.
Yep, amp hours. Okay.
How do you know to not overstall solar or over-install battery capacity?
Okay, so the question Ken had was he wants to put solar panels in, and he wants to know how many panels he should have, how many watts, how much charging power to the batteries, what's the ratio of the solar capacity to your battery capacity or the amp hours. And the best thing to do is I would recommend go to Go Power, which is gpelectric.com. That is the Go Power site, and they have wonderful calculators on there. Same thing with Zamp, zampsolar.com. And what you want to do is you have to look at, first of all, what you're going to run, how much stuff, how long you need to run it before you need to recharge it. And that'll tell you what the battery capacity that you need is. That's the first step, in my opinion, is I need to have the right batteries to start with. And then once I see I have X amount of amp hours, then I'm going to look at my solar panels, and whether they're 80 watts, 130 watts, they're only going to do so much. It's going to take so much time to bring those batteries back up. And what Zamp told me is a good rule of thumb is for one battery, one 12 volt battery or 2 6-volt batteries, that one 100 watt panel is going to take about 4 to 5 hours to charge that back up. Now, we've hit on this many times because solar's been getting really, really popular. And Ken, the first thing I would recommend is to check your batteries out. If you don't have batteries or your batteries are weak, you're looking to put in new batteries, the first thing I would look at is absorbed glass mat batteries. They're going to sulfate less. You can get the lead acid batteries, but you have to condition them. You have to make sure they go through that desulfation stage and so forth. So, I would recommend going in there and, let's say you're going to go for a weekend. So since you're putting solar in, you're going to be boondocking. That means that your refrigerator is going to run off of LP and battery power. So it's going to draw your batteries down faster. All your lights inside are going to go off the batteries. Your stove, so some of the stuff that you might have used on the electrical side, on the 120 volt side, that let's say for a water heater, for example, if it was a 120/LP one, now it's going to work on LP and draw battery power, where before it would have run off of 120. So you have to calculate how long you're going to go. If you have one 12 volt battery that's 27, a group 27, you're not going to make the weekend. And so you're going to have to look at the usage is the big thing, and how long you're going to go, how many people are going to be in it, so what they're going to use as well. And one of the things to keep in mind is that furnace takes an awful lot of battery power. So if you're looking to do it in cold weather too, you're going to have to factor that in, because that thing's going to run almost all the time. So there isn't a cut answer to say 200 watts for X amount of amp hours, because you need to look at your usage and what your batteries are at and make sure they're good batteries. I would recommend, in fact, I just had this with a friend of mine that has an RV. He does construction, and so instead of going to a hotel, he bought a travel trailer, and his furnace quit working. And so one of the first things we looked at is he had replaced his battery, but he went down to O'Reilly Auto Parts and put in a cold cranking amp battery. And 6 months later, that thing's no good. So he went down and bought an AGM. He ended up getting a Napa one. And I recommended Trojan, Lifeline. Napa is used by Winnebago, and they've had a lot of success with it. It just seems they have better welds, they have better lead used in the cells, and it's just a better battery. Don't go down and get the cheapie at some kind of a discount store. The only advantage of that is the $89.95 price point, and you will not be happy. So, okay.
Virginia asks, my One Place brand systems monitor panel is so pixelated, I can't read the status of any systems. Is there something I can replace myself?
And what was her name?
Virginia.
Virginia says that her One Place monitoring system is so pixelated that she cannot read any of the readings in it. And One Place is a Winnebago name brand. What they did is they took Intellitek's monitoring system and put that in, which is it's a kind of an automatic shut off, and then it's got all the monitor panels. So they call that whole panel One Place. And so basically your board in that thing is, you've probably got some solder points that are bad in it, and you're just not getting a good read. What I would recommend is to, get a hold of Winnebago, their owner relations department, see if you can get the part number for that, because that's kind of proprietary to their system, even though Intellitek helped design it, but a lot of the stuff in there they've redesigned and gotten built specifically for them. And I don't know if you can get just that. It'd be like an LED board for that, but owner relations could give you the part number for that, or you could also call Winnebago Parts. If you go online, Mobility RV in Hanlintown also goes by WinnebagoParts.com, I believe it is, and they sell all the proprietary Winnebago stuff. So I would say give them a call and see if they break that down into just that component that you need.
Jean Paul asks, every time I plug in my battery on my fifth wheel, I mixed the wires and burns the fuses.
Okay, Jean Paul, you said? So it says every time that he plugs in his fifth wheel, he burns the battery, must mix the wires. So,
burns the fuses.
Burns the fuses. Okay, that one, without being able to get in there with a multimeter and see what you've got going on with that, it's hard to tell what exactly is causing it, because first of all, I would look at your plug-in source. Does it do it in just one spot you're at all the time, or has it done it in several different places? And what I'm getting at with that one is I would check what voltage you've got coming out of your pedestal or wherever you're plugging into. We do see some campgrounds that if it gets above 125 volts, you don't want to plug in there. You will have some problems with that. And that could be part of the problem, that you're getting some spikes in there. Another thing that I would recommend is maybe get a surge protector, because you might be getting some of that voltage variation in surging of the voltage in whatever pedestal you're at. Then the next thing is you need to come in, and so here's how the system works. You're plugged in, and I don't know if you have a 30 amp or a 50 amp. Most of your fifth wheels are going to have a 50 amp service, but the way it typically works with the 50 amp, you have two hot legs that are running 120. So it comes into a distribution center similar to this one. You may have one that has the converter in a separate area, but this one has circuit breakers right here, So our 120 comes in to the bus bar, supplies all these circuit breakers here, and they're going to supply our 120 volt appliances inside, which is the refrigerator. It will be the outlets, television, that type of stuff. And then it also has one that is for the converter, which is your battery charger. And so if you're blowing fuses up in here, then you would have something with your converter, and you would have to, first of all, say, what kind of voltage do I have coming in? Also put a multimeter on your batteries and see what kind of voltage is going into your batteries from your converter. Now, I have seen sometimes where the converter is supposed to only do about 13.6 or 14 volts and then shuts off when it hits a certain point. And sometimes they go bad, and eventually what happens is that that converter is now putting too much voltage in there and constantly. So it's literally boiling the batteries, and it could blow your breaker. But the other thing too, I would check and find out, the breaker that you've got, it would have to be going to, let me see what this has got here. Use, and this happens to be progressive dynamics. So you got your battery posts right here, and these would be your breakers for your battery connection, and they're at 25 amps. So you might want to also check and make sure you got the right fuses in there as well. You might have somebody put too small of fuses in there, or something happened, and when you replaced them, you looked at, these are all 10s and 15s. Make sure you look at that board and figure out what's in there. And outside of that, I would say you probably need to get an electrician in there with a multimeter and figure out exactly what's happened. But first of all, start with checking your voltage at your campground. What am I getting? I should be at about 115, 120, maybe. I start getting higher than that, then I could have some problems with this. The other thing too is make sure you don't have a short in your battery. If you have a short in the battery, sometimes that will do the same thing.
Glenn asks, my Class A furnace will only kick on when furnace is first turned on. After that, it will not kick back on. As it is turning off, it seems like it is very, very slowly. It's very slowly turning off. Where do I start?
Okay, so Glenn. Okay, Glenn says that his furnace will start up the first time, and then it won't start up after that. And so he wants to know what it seems like. It's kind of powering down, kind of. I guess when it shuts off, it's shutting off very slow. So the first thing you have to understand is how the furnace works. And do I have one here? Yes, I do. So let's pull a furnace up here. So this is your typical slide-in furnace. You've got your intake and exhaust on this side here, and this is where the gas valve would come in. So when your thermostat is set to the desired temperature, it gets down below that, it's going to send to the impulse to this board over here, and it will start the fan up. And inside this fan, there's a little switch. It's called a sail switch. And that fan is supposed to go at a certain speed. It lifts that switch up, and it tells the module board is, yep, I have enough speed in the fan. I'm going to be able to exhaust this, all the exhaust from the burner out this outside, and good to go. Open up the gas valve, spark, and light. And so you do that the first time, and it works fine and it runs. On the back side of this as well is a temperature switch. And so what this temperature switch is saying is that I don't want to get it too hot inside of here. I want to make sure that it's exhausting, that I've got good airflow. And if that temperature gets up above a certain degrees on this, it will shut it down, and it will not start up until it gets to the point where it cools back down. So what we see a lot of times happening with a furnace like this is the batteries are crucial for this to operate, and it's because it has to have this fan going at a certain speed. So if it works the first time and it shuts down after that, and then it doesn't work after that, the very first thing I would check is your thermostat. If it clicks, you go down, do you hear a click in your furnace down here, because it's going to say, do we have enough power in here? Does your fan start? But it just doesn't get going. A lot of times what happens is your batteries, if they are sulfated and you're not using much in there, they're topped off kind of good, the converter came on, it charged them up, the furnace starts up and it's, yep, I got enough speed, yep, I'm going to open the valve, poof, okay, everything works good on the inside. Then once you run this furnace for about 15-20 minutes, those batteries go poof, way down, because if they're sulfated, and it's a big problem in the RV industry, even if you're plugged in, that converter doesn't kick in to a certain point. So your batteries could be just low enough that it's not going to start. The first thing I would look for is, after that first cycle, when it comes back, does it click? Does the thermostat click? Is that working? First of all. Second thing is then, does the fan start? But it doesn't light. It doesn't open up the gas valve. It doesn't click. I'm not getting any heat. If the fan's not working, then the next thing I would check is, do I hear a click? Go outside, and if you can find your your inlet and your exhaust here, do I smell gas? If I smell gas, propane, trying to open this and going, then the chances are you've got a bad module board in that, because if it lights the first time. So the first thing I would do is I would check my batteries. I would probably get a battery charger, and if you're plugged in, and even like I say, even if you're plugged in, it could still happen. But if you're boondocking, especially, that's more than likely the batteries. So put a battery booster on it. See if that will make it start the blower motor to go and start to go. So that isolates the fact it's my batteries, not my furnace. And then if that doesn't work, then you're going to have to come back and, does the gas valve open? Does it try to light? The other thing I would also check is to make sure you don't have any of your vents inside covered or closed, because you have to have that airflow. You have to have that movement inside. And if you cover or shut your vents inside the RV, then it won't allow the hot air that's being out of this burner assembly, it won't allow that to go out into your coach. This is going to get hotter and hotter and hotter. And there are times where eventually you will ruin this temp switch, because it'll shut it off, but it does it so many times that it'll ruin it until it cools way down. And sometimes it takes 2 hours to do that. It opens up. So make sure all your vents are open, check your batteries. Then from that point on, again, probably a module board, and that's when you need to probably take it in. Let's see. Okay, nice to have props. It's hard to get a motorhome down in the basement. Down, she says. And she says, down, sit. Okay, next question.
All right, I know the next question is from Kevin.
Next question is from Kevin. All right.
And he would like to know, what are your feelings towards adding soft start to my Class A air conditioners?
Kevin's question was, what is my opinion of adding the soft start to the air conditioners? And we see more and more people are doing that. I don't think Dometic and Coleman, who is RVP now, recommend it in theirs. But what that does is that when your air conditioner starts up, it's a pretty high amp draw to begin with. So it's really taxing on the motor. And there are times when they start to get a little older, a little weak. Sometimes they'll blow a breaker in the inside of it. So this soft start is it's an aftermarket product put on. I see a lot of people doing it. I personally haven't put them on. Most of my experience came out of Winnebago, which was very, very tied to what the OEM said. So we didn't do a lot of stuff that was a little bit experimental out there, but I have seen some great write-ups. I know that Motorhome Magazine, Trailer Life have both researched those a little bit and have some good opinions on them. So I would not be afraid, I don't think, to research it a little more and look at who's offering those out there, because if you're getting some spikes in that initial startup, that's probably a good way to go.
Dan asks, when utilizing an auto leveling system, it may happen that the front wheels come off the ground. Understanding that the rear wheels should not come off the ground, do you see any harm in having the front wheels come off the ground?
So Dan's question was, when using the auto level system, sometimes the front wheels come off the ground, and is that okay? And his comment was, we know the back wheels should not come off the ground, which is true. And most of your chassis manufacturers, your RV manufacturers, don't recommend the wheels coming off the ground just because you're relying on it's just not quite stable enough with the smaller jacks we see today. And I guess, in my opinion, what I've always done is I've carried some leveling blocks with me, and just gotten those, once it levels, go in underneath, and you can manually raise that a little bit higher, put the blocks to the point where you're at, and bring it down and rest them on there. Then I'm not relying on that front jack. And the bigger the coach, the more you're going to put stress on the welds where that jack is typically welded to the chassis. You've got about 1.5 inch diameter piston in that thing that you're relying on. So depending on how big the rig is, how many slide rooms you have, how many people are walking around inside, all that stuff, I personally like a little more stability. I see it all the time, though. I mean, you go to rallies, you go to campgrounds, you see, wheels up off the ground, chalked up, maybe a short period of time. That might not be too bad, but I just don't like the stress that could be put on those.
Ronald asks, Freelander Coachman, I assume that's what he has, the stereo has not worked and the TV doesn't work properly. I got it from Huron RC RV. They will not honor the warranty. What should I do?
Okay, so Ronald says he has a Coachman Freelander. We had the gentleman that we rent facilities from had a little 24-foot Coachman Freelander. We used a lot and did some work on it for him. Beautiful little unit. Says his stereo doesn't work and his television doesn't work properly. He bought it from a dealer in Huron, and they will not honor the warranty. So the first thing I would do is I would contact Coachman. I would get it documented. That they won't. I don't know how old it is or what the warranty is on that. I'm not familiar with that dealership at all, so maybe they can, Coachman can refer you into another place. Typically on a Coachman Freelander, I'm pretty sure that's a Class C, so that's the radio in that probably is the chassis radio, I'm guessing. If not, then it would be a Coachman issue. If it's the chassis radio, then it would be a Ford issue. And I would call Coachman, get it documented so that you got it down there, find out who they recommend. If it is a Ford, if it is the chassis radio in that. And some manufacturers upgrade those. Some buy the chassis and then they go in and put a Jensen or something that's not stock in it. But most of the time they don't do that. And the one I saw, did not have a upgraded radio in it. But then for the television, I guess one of the things that I would do is I would take the television out, and most of them, if it's a newer unit, he didn't say what year it was, did he? Okay, but it's probably a flat screen TV, probably easy enough to get out. And if you could hook it up to a different antenna, maybe even get just one of those cheap flat antennas somewhere, and just see if you can get it to work somewhere else. And then that would identify, is it your TV or is it your antenna and your wiring system? And then you can kind of go from there. A lot of times what happens if some of these OEM parts don't work, like the TVs and various things, that the dealers don't really have a good way of working on something like that, or a relationship, and you're probably going to be directed more into an audio video type of a place. But again, go to Coachman, get it documented, make sure they can steer you in the right direction, and you got to have your model number, serial number of the TV, and you should be able to get it taken care of.
Frank asks, I have a 2004 Monaco Class A. When it sits for long periods with everything turned off, the fridge requires a jumper procedure for the gas to work the fridge. I read about it in the manual, but I had a pro do it. Why does the fridge require this procedure after a long shutdown? I even found a jumper wire for this procedure in the pilot light area, so obviously the former owner was used to having to do this all the time.
So, what was the name?
Frank.
Frank. Frank's got a 2004 Monaco Class A, and anytime he lets it sit long enough, the refrigerator requires a jumper wire to get it started. And I'm not sure exactly where the jumper wire goes, but what I've seen in a lot of cases is if you let your rig sit and it's not plugged in and it's not recharging the batteries get down to a certain point. And Monaco is just pretty common that they use an inverter. So I'm not sure if your refrigerator is running off an inverter. I doubt in 2004 it'd be a residential refrigerator. And you did make a comment about the gas in there as well. So I doubt if it's a residential refrigerator, it's probably a Dometic. And usually what's happening with that is when the batteries get down to a certain point, then the gas valve in it basically opens or closes, I guess, in a gas valve case, and it actually has to get a voltage in there to be jumped. Monaco is now owned by the Rev Group, and I guess one of the things that I would recommend is if you post that question and make sure you give the model number of the refrigerator in there. Post that question on our Facebook or the social media stuff, and let our tech guys and myself dig into a little more. If it is a Dometic, I do have a good contact at Dometic that I can call on all these things and just find out, what is there something, I haven't really heard of anything in the gas valve state, more in the inverter state that inverter goes into just a lockdown safety mode that has to be jumped. So is it the gas valve that has to be jumped, or is it the inverter that has to be jumped? So if you can give us a little more information and try some of that stuff and post that question on there. And if anybody out here has had that same issue, feel free to jump in and let us know, how you've tackled it.
Next question. Should you disconnect your RV solar when the RV is stored indoors for months? Example, there's no sunlight nor power from the solar panels, but the controller will still be connected to the batteries.
So the question is when he has a solar panel and he's storing his vehicle inside a building where there is no access to sunlight, so the panel's not charging anything, but it is still connected to the battery. I would disconnect the solar panel just because anything connected to that battery could have a tendency to maybe take a drain on it. That controller shouldn't. It should be a stop for that, or a filter with it. But you should have a fuse or be able to just disconnect that pretty easily. And in my opinion, one of the things, if you have access to electricity in there, you need to put some type of a battery minder on it or something. If you don't, I would recommend taking the batteries out and putting them somewhere in a garage or someplace you can condition those, because they're going to sit in sulfate if you just let them sit for the winter.
Londell asks, some RVS have leaf springs, some have a torsion suspension. Which is better?
Repeat that again.
Some RVS have leaf springs.
RVs, okay.
Oh. Some have a torsion suspension.
Okay. Well, the question was, Londell says some RVs have leaf springs, some of them have torsioned, and I'm assuming that you're talking about trailer axles at that point. If you're looking at the motorized, back in the day, Chevrolet had a A-frame front suspensions with springs in the front, of coil springs, and the Ford had a I-beam suspension with leaf springs in those. Those were two different, but those have changed. Ford's the only one out there now. They've got leaf springs on theirs until you get up into the big buses that are going to have the Freightliner and Spartan. So they got a totally different suspension in the front. So if you're looking at the trailer side of it, it has more to do with weight and stability in the two. Dexter and Lippert both make a torsion which has rubber bushings basically, or rubber rods inside the bar that help keep it from vibrating and work with the suspension in it. And you only get up to a certain weight that is able to put onto those. So I don't think one is any better than the other. It's just more what the application, what the weight is, and the overall length of the vehicle. And all it's trying to do is, suspend that weight, keep it from swaying, keep it from highway hopping. And so they're two different philosophies. And I'm not sure if the leaf spring's actually the cheaper style. I see that more on some of the less expensive units. So that might be a price point too.
Next one's a little long.
This one.
David asks, in February 2020, I bought a Jayco motorhome and had a Go Power 510-watt solar system installed. It includes an inverter and a controller to monitor the charge. I added 4 6-volt AGM batteries, 2 in series, and then the grouped in parallel. They left the original 12-volt battery installed. I checked the controller at least every other day. Last year, I left the batteries on 24 hours and I'd see 13.9 through 13.4 volts. In November, I started use the coach battery shut off switch. Now it usually shows 14.5 to 14 to just 14. Is that okay?
Okay. So David bought a unit in February 2020, and he has 510 watt solar panels up on top. He's installed 4 AGM batteries in it, 6-volt batteries. So they hook them in series. You take 2 6 volts, you do positive to negative. That gives you a 12-volt bank. That's called in series. Then you take the other 2 and you do positive to negative, and that gives you a second 12-volt bank. And then you hook positive to positive on your 2. That's parallel. And so that gives you still a 12-volt bank, but it gives you twice the amp hours because you get 2 banks of that. And he's saying that he was seeing 13.6, and now he's seeing 14.5 volts. Volts, right? That he's 13.9 and 13.4.
And then 14.4 to 14.
Okay, so what that's doing, and Go Power is a great company. That controller that they have is a multi-stage controller, and what it's doing is it is regulating those batteries, and it's doing a higher bulk charge. So it's going to do a bulk charge, and then it's going to do which desulfates those batteries. It breaks up the sulfur, and even if they're AGM, they're going to get a little bit of that as well. And so then they go into a bulk charge or a float charge, and then I gotta think this. Desulfation, it goes into a bulk stage, it goes into float, and then an equalization. It's been a while since we've done these, and it's like, wow, I've been quarantined, so I have a quarantine mind. But that battery charger controller in there should be able to sense the charge of the batteries and what it's going to need to bring those back up. So I wouldn't be too concerned about that, at this stage.
Jim asks, when I bought my Class A Dolphin, there is a cable connecting the positive post on the 12-volt house batteries to the 12-volt chassis battery. Is this correct?
So he bought a Dolphin, National RV. I did a lot of work for them after I left Winnebago, videos, training program, and so forth. So that's a cool unit. He's saying that there is a cable from the house battery to the engine battery. Correct?
12-volt chassis battery.
12-volt chassis battery. From the house battery to 12-volt chassis battery. That typically is not the way that was set up. Because now you're connecting those two, and the house batteries could drain the chassis battery down. And so it's hooking them all together, and then it's going to keep recharging, draining and recharging that engine battery or chassis battery, and it'll ruin it. What probably the way it was set up originally is, and somebody probably just kind of thought this through, is that your house batteries are connected to your engine battery, but in a totally different way, and vice versa. Your engine battery is connected to your house battery through what's called a battery isolation manager, which is a BIM system, and it's a solenoid. And what that is that you have your house batteries are being charged by your converter when you're plugged into 110 or your engine your generator is running. That charges those through the converter. When you're driving down the road, your engine alternator is charging your engine battery or chassis battery, and that needs to be charged up all the time. So now what happens is you get this BIM sitting in the middle, battery isolation manager, and it's sitting in the middle. And what it's saying is that when I'm driving down the road and this alternator is charging my engine battery, I'd sure like that to charge my house batteries, because it's going to run about 14 volts, and that'll mean that they can stay charged when I get to the campground. And so you should have a switch on the dash that says either momentary, a battery switch, whatever. We used to call it a MOM switch. And so when that's on, that's allowing a charge to go to your house batteries. And that switch then also will allow you to momentarily, spring-loaded, push that switch in. And what that does is it opens up that solenoid for a brief period of time and allows you to draw power from your house batteries to your engine battery. So let's say you're at the campground and you're boondocking and you leave the chassis radio on because you wanted to listen to the ball game or whatever it was, and you don't realize that, I just ran my engine battery down and now I'm stuck. Well, you know what? I got my house batteries here. I can plug into the outlet outside. So I'm just going to hit that momentary switch and I'm going to give myself a jump start to those engine batteries. So it's a temporary switch, that solenoid. So there should not be a cable going from your chassis battery to your house batteries direct.
Katie wants you to mention that she put a link in the chat for people to go to our photo gallery and share a photo of their rig.
Oh, cool. Yeah. So Katie put a link into the chat and you can go in and share a photo of your rig. Would love to see what's out there. I just talked to a friend of mine yesterday that called up and said he was somewhere and saw that they are building RVs out of semi-trailers now. And 53-foot long semi-trailers with 7 slides. So whatever kind of RV you got out there, take a picture of it, send it to us. We're looking for all the fun and exciting stuff. And also what I'd like you to do too is for those of you that are traveling with pets, let's see some pictures of your pets. Those are fun. Those are fun. Some of them are naughty. I have seen some really good ones.
Jeffrey asks, will a Honda 2200i generator run a 9400 BTU Coleman Mach AC?
Okay. And what was his name?
Jeffrey.
Jeffrey asks if a Honda 2400 or 2200? 2200 will run a 9400 BTU air conditioner. And it should, because that Honda is going to give you 30 amps of power. But it also depends on what else you got running in the rig. So that 9400, and it kind of depends on what year it was, but I would imagine, does it say the year of the RV? Okay. But if it's within the last 10, 15 years, it's going to be a more high efficient one. So it's probably going to draw somewhere in about the, even on the high side, maybe 10 amps. I think the 13.5s and the 1500s are going to drop in the 14, 15 amp range. So you're going to be down lower than that, but you got to look at what else you've got going on inside. So if you got your rig plugged into that and your converter's trying to charge your batteries and you're using your refrigerator on that, so you might want to get what's called an amwatt. Do I have one of those with me? I do not believe I do. Oh, no, I don't have it here. Anyway, an amwatt you can get at about any place, home improvement stores in their electrical department. Ace Hardware has them. I've even seen them at Walmart. And what an amwatt does is you plug that in and you plug in like your toaster oven, your microwave. Find out what your other stuff is pulling, and you should be able to tell on your refrigerator, what that amp draw is as well. So you got to remember you're only going to be able to provide about 30 amps to that and a certain amount of watts. So you have to do a little bit of math, but you should be able to run that. And just kind of monitor your other stuff. You might have to make sure you don't have the microwave on at the same time. Shut the air conditioner down for the 2 minutes you're using it.
Jerry Ann says, we were given a 1978 Cardinal camper trailer. We are welding a new floor and have stripped the entire inside. We are also painting the outside and then we'll be building the inside. We will be replacing the appliances and sink. The tires and electrical are all fine. There is no bathroom or shower. What are your recommendations and resources for building this? We can't find anything at all on this configuration.
So they were given a 1975?
78.
1978 Cardinal travel trailer, and then it sounds like they're going to gut it and paint the outside and do basically a reno in the whole thing, and that's kind of what we're doing as well. Ours is a 1997, so it's not quite as old as yours is, but there are several places in Elkhart that you can buy furniture. Braden Hall makes a lot of them. What I've seen a lot of people do is IKEA. They go and just kind of spec out what kind of space they have, and IKEA has a whole variety of different components that you can use to do bedding, to do cabinetry, to do countertops, all that kind of stuff. Another option that what we're going to do for countertops is we, of course, have George, who is an outstanding woodworker, runs the Woodworkers Guild of America, and he's going to build all our cabinets. But if you can build the frame of it and then just get the dimensions, you can go down to Walmart, or not Walmart, Menards, Home Depot, any of the places like that, and get your own countertops made and do a little bit of custom cabinetry in that aspect as well. There is a group called Vintage Trailers out of California that is big into this. The gentleman out there, and I don't have their website right handy, but they've got a magazine that comes out quarterly. They run boondocking, or not boot camps, they call it, on restoring old trailers like this. And this is exactly what they do. So that might be a good organization to look into. I guess too, I would recommend kind of looking through our video library that we have. We've got several upgrades that we've done with older units, not quite that old, but some that would still probably benefit you in some of the electronics, in the converters, in the batteries, so forth. One thing I would be very, very careful about is you really need to figure out what your weight ratings of those axles and those tires are, specifically the axles, because back in 1975, those were pretty lightweight axles. And you start putting in, heavier fabrics and carpeting and some of the stuff, you want to make it a little more luxurious, especially if you go with Corian and some of that stuff, you're going to put more weight in it that those things can handle, and you're going to have a nightmare. So I would definitely check and see if you can't get those axles, figure out what weight rating they are. If they're a 5-bolt axle, chances are in 75, the 5 bolts today are going to be about 3,500 pounds. But back then, even if they're I don't think they would have gone 4-bolt, but you might have lighter axles than that. So you got to be careful. Maybe go weigh it first now, see where it's at, and make sure you understand what you're putting in that as far as weight ratings.
Dennis wants to know if you will recommend a good microwave oven to replace our 19-year-old Dometic built-in that finally gave up the ghost.
Well, and I see he wants to know a recommendation on a microwave. His old Dometic finally gave out, and there are several microwaves that I know Winnebago was using Sharp for a while. There are I'm trying to think of who. Lippert has their own proprietary brand. Magic Chef was bought out, and I cannot remember who they were using. But the biggest thing with the microwave, in my opinion, is to find one that has got a forward venting face to it. In a lot of cases, you got a microwave in a house that's got a vent that goes out the back and into a vent with the oven or something like that. But this needs to vent out to the front of it. and it needs to be able to handle the temperature changes and some of the road vibrations. So the cheaper microwaves that are out there are probably not going to last. And I would stick with more of the Sharp brand that seems to be holding up pretty well. Uh, um, is it LGI? LG is another one that a lot of manufacturers are using and seems to hold up pretty well.
Don says he's new to RVing, and he said, I see the switch to the RV for the battery inside the rig. What is that for?
Okay, well, Don, welcome to RVing, and he says he sees the switch for the battery that is inside the rig, probably if it's inside the step well, and it says battery, it's probably a battery disconnect. And what that does is that it's very common that when you leave your RV for a while, you you can leave a compartment light on. You wouldn't know it. Something inside is on, closet light, whatever it happens to be, and that would drain your battery. So instead of going every time and pulling the battery cable off to make sure that everything's shut off, they put a battery disconnect switch in there. So when you go to store it, you go to leave it for a period of time, you open the door, you step out, you go in, click that battery disconnect, and it's like taking the battery cable off so that you're not draining that battery. Now, even when you do that, typically the LP leak detector is still hooked to the battery directly. You can't disconnect that, so you might still get a drain in it. But I would say if you take a multimeter and you check your battery, you see 12.6 volts on it. You hit that battery disconnect in there, and that wouldn't do it. I'm sorry, you have to go to the other side of it. But you should be able to turn a light on somewhere, hit that battery disconnect, and then the light goes off, and then you know that that's disconnecting, keeping anything from drawing in your battery.
Don has a King Dome and a Dish Wally with two coaxial cables.
Coax cables.
I'm certain they are for both televisions. The system is from 2006, so I need to determine coordinates to get a satellite, and I have yet to be able to do so. What can you recommend?
Okay, so he's got a dish. He's got a King Dome satellite dish, and I'm assuming since it's King Dome, it's the um, Dome one that will find it automatically. If not, you might have to um, go in and manually do it. And then he has a Dish Wally, and the Dish Wally is it's a receiver, and it also will let you do DVR recordings and so forth in it. So from Dish Network. So you are looking for the Dish satellites, and they have two in the east and they have two or three in the west, and there are coordinates on it. So what I would recommend is that you go to your the Dish Network website. You can also go to the Kingdom website, and they will have a graph in there and show you exactly what coordinates you would need to get to those two. I can't remember them offhand, but we actually did a video on a Winegard antenna with the Wally on it, and we had a unit outside, and we showed where the different satellites were at and the coordinates of those. If it's a manual one of the things you could get is something like this. I'm assuming if it's a dome, it's probably finds it automatically. But Winegard has this little product here, and what you do is you dial the sensitivity way down, put your coax lead in here, and this goes to the receiver, and then you just move your satellite till you see that needle start, and now you know you're getting really close to it. You dial the sensitivity down, and you can get right on it rather than trying to find it on a TV. And so again, I'm not sure what you have as far as that King antenna, but if it's a manual one where you got to go in and move it yourself and find it, this is a must-have. But otherwise, I would get on the King or the Dish site, and you can find where those coordinates are.
Johnny asks, I have an older toy hauler 2001. The dump valves do not seal all the way. Better replace the whole. Is it better to replace the whole thing, or can I replace just the seals?
Okay, so he's got a fifth wheel or a toy hauler that is 2001, you say?
Yes.
And the dump valves will not close all the way. And he's wondering if it's better to replace the whole thing or just the seals. And I think you probably need to do a little more investigation with it. And this is not a very fun job to do, but there are a couple things that could be causing this other than just the seals. And normally with a toy hauler, you've got your dump valves are actually over on another place, and your valve that you're pulling is a cable valve that goes across the distance underneath. And that cable can get stretched, and it can also get to the point where there's too much slop in it for it to go all the way back to close. Because the way your dump valve is going to work, and I don't have one here with me, I got one out in the shop, but the dump valve is a spade is all it is. So you got your two hoses coming down. This one comes from the black water tank, and this one goes out to the dump bayonet, and you've got a spade that goes in through the middle, and it's a circle. And so you've got two seals on each side of this here. So it could be literally the spade not going all the way through to close it. It could be something, a debris that's in those seals. It could be the excuse me, the handle and the cable itself that might just need to be tightened up, or it could be the seals. And so what I would recommend is to get in, and probably the first thing is just take that assembly apart. You should be able to do that with a series of nuts and bolts in there to get that in there and take a look at those seals. And maybe even before that, let me back up just one more step. I would probably go through and clean it very well. I know Thetford makes, and I do not have that here as well, but there's a variety of different products. There's a seal conditioner. There is a cleaner. Clean that black water tank out really, really well, because if there's any kind of debris down in there, it's not going to close. That spade's going to hit that stuff, especially if you used the wrong toilet paper. You got cat litter down inside, that thing. So I would make sure it's cleaned out really, really well to start with. And you're probably going to want to do that anyway if you're going to start tearing it apart, and just see if any of that helps.
Steve is a new first-time owner of a 2011 pop-up. What are the recommendation annual maintenance tasks that you'd say are essential? I already replaced the trailer bearings and older battery. Both were shot.
Okay. Steve just bought, he's a proud owner of a 2011 pop-up and wants to know what maintenance he should do. And with those, pop-ups are very susceptible to sunlight. So you really want to check the roof structure condition. It's probably made of a fiberglass or reinforced fiberglass panel, and it will start to deteriorate. It'll start to chalk, eventually start cracking. So you want to get some type of a fiberglass UV protection into it, whether it's Protectol makes one, McGuire's has a carnauba wax with a UV protection in it. Get that top piece conditioned. If it's rubber, get the rubber conditioner from Dicor. The next thing I would recommend is that you periodically want to check the seams in your canvas, because you got stitching all around that keeps those panels in, and that can dry out, and it'll start to deteriorate. It'll leak. It'll break. They do make a seam sealer that you can put in there. Some of them are the awning companies, but it's more of a canvas. So you go in right where all that stitching is at and just inspect it. Make sure that you clean it out. Make sure that you keep it conditioned so that's going to seal and it's not going to deteriorate. Then just like any RV, you want to make sure you check the tires and clean the tires. You want to make sure that you don't have dry rot. Weather checking on the outside of those tires. You don't want to put any kind of tire shine on that. That'll make them go faster. Cover them. And so the other thing I would recommend is to go in and check out our maintenance videos. We also have, I think there's a downloadable chart with the maintenance as well. Just to kind of every year bringing stuff out. And there's some really good articles too. Just just go through our library on articles and type in, maintenance or bringing your unit out for the summertime or the spring, or bringing it out from hibernation. So there's a lot of those other things, but really want to check the canvas, the plastic, the windows, you want to call them, and that type of stuff.
Three more questions we'll try to get through quick.
3 more questions.
Johnny asked, is plumbing in toy hauler different from house plumbing?
Johnny asks, is the plumbing in a toy hauler different than in your house plumbing? And we're seeing a lot of manufacturers going towards more residential style plumbing. A lot of houses are using PEX, and the progression of the RV industry was it used for many years. It used the gray or the beige mobile home 3/8 inch plumbing, and then it went up to 1/2 inch. And we saw that it was using more of the plastic of the PEX. And so now today you see it a little bit closer to that. I mean, you're not gonna see the copper that you would see in residential plumbing, but you do see PEX or other brands of stuff like that. Flaret system, Winnebago uses in theirs with some PEX stuff in it. So it is getting more residential style. You can replace a lot of it with residential compression fittings. We did a couple of videos on upgrading the shower and the faucet in a 1992, I believe it was, Itasca Sun Cruiser, and used residential plumbing right from Menards, kind of like a Home Depot.
Okay, Frank from earlier, he said, sorry for the confusion on the 2004 Monaco. There is an electrical panel inside the door on the outside of the RV to the fridge pilot light area. Okay, so there's an electrical panel inside the door, and then in quotations on the outside of the RV, and then to the fridge pilot light area. The manual states that in the event the gas fails to light, a little jumper wire is required to touch 2 named points on the electrical panel to renew the connection. I hired a gas guy to do this, and when he did, a fuse blew in another panel. That fuse was replaced, and the fridge then fired off on gas and worked all summer.
Okay. So Frank came back on his Monaco, and he said that there is a panel on the outside, and I'm assuming that you're referring to the back of the refrigerator has a vent panel that you can take off, and in there is your gas line, your gas valve, your burner assembly, everything is in there. And that's a vent designed to bring air in and push up, and then you got a vent on the top of your roof that tries to get that heat out of there. And I do remember seeing in one of the owner's manuals that I had in some of the older stuff that if the gas valve did stick, that there was a jump procedure that was used in that. And I'm not familiar enough with it. Steve is the one I always go to on when it gets into more of the technical appliance stuff. But what I would recommend is I think Monaco used the Dometic. You should have an owner's manual or a service manual, and if you can get in touch with Rev or one of those and see if we can't identify that procedure for that. And again, I remember seeing, we were working on a 1996 Monaco that a friend of mine has here, and just kind of going through the owner's manual on other just maintenance, troubleshooting kind of stuff. And there was something like that in there. Again, I don't know specifically what that procedure was, but if you could post that on our Facebook thing, we'll do a little more digging. I'll do a little more research, and maybe next month, you come back again, I'll have some answers on that. And it was 2001, right? 2004 for Monaco. Gas valve, jump. We'll research it, Frank. Thank you.
All right,
One more.
Last question.
All right.
From Robin. When we began,
This is for the big money. Let me spin the wheel. All right.
When we began RVing 16 years ago, we were told not to keep our propane on while traveling. We just bought a 2021 Jayco Greyhawk and have been told that now it is safe to keep the propane on while on the road. What do you think? I
don't think you should have your propane on running down the road. Everybody does it, or most people do it. But the problem that you have is that when you have and the only reason you run propane when you're going down the road is to keep your refrigerator cold. And we have done numerous videos on it, tests on it, where if you bring your refrigerator down to 36 degrees, you have a little bit of air circulation in it, you keep the door closed, it will maintain below 40 degrees for over 6 hours. And so, there really is no reason to have the propane on. And the reason I say that is if you have a gas valve that opens up or leaks, you've got all these connections for your stove, your refrigerator, your water heater, all these things, you're going down the road and it's bouncing, and you could have just a small little leak. One of the valves loosens up. You sideswipe a construction or a bridge or somebody, heaven forbid that would happen. But if it does, you could have propane then leaking out into your RV, and then you've got your refrigerator trying to light, and that's dangerous. And what a lot of people are saying today versus quite a few years ago is there is an excess flow valve that is in your regulator at your gas tank. And it's just a spring-loaded valve that if there happens to be an excess pressure, like a line that's split and gas is spewing out, that will push that spring and it will close that gas valve. That is a good safety feature. That is something that you can do. However, what happens if it's just a small leak, something that would be about the same as a stove running? I've been in RV shows before and training programs where somebody backed into the stove and hit the valve on the stove and opened up the gas valve. All of a sudden you're inside the RV going, what's that smell? Well, all they did was back in and push that valve in and turned it on. So I don't think it's a good idea to drive down the road. Now, one of the products that we've just come across is a product called Gas Stop, and we'll be featuring that here at some point. I came across it a year ago or so at the North Carolina show. Didn't have a lot of information on it, but just recently saw them at the Tampa show and talked to not only the owner, who's from the Netherlands, and it's huge over there, with propane tanks for grills and all kinds of stuff, but starting to get into the RV industry here, and talked with their national manager, and it's pretty interesting. They're going to send me a sample of one. We're going to test it here. That might be an option that about the only way I'd say that I would recommend that you do it. I say keep it closed, keep your refrigerator shut. It'll maintain 40 degrees for 6 hours. You should be fine. So with that, we need to wrap it up. Again, send us pictures of your RV, of your pets, and stay warm out there. Hopefully the South will get their electricity back, and everybody have a great day, and let's wait for spring coming and we can get out in an RV. Take care, everybody. Thank you.